I left that house 3 years ago with a bruised cheek and a promise next time. They'd hear everything. The night of Sloane's engagement party, Graham shoved through the kitchen door and whispered, "Nobody's going to believe you." He didn't know every room had ears now, and the clock was recording every minute, every second, every breath he took. When the cuffs clicked shut at number 8, my mother kept repeating, "You're destroying this family." No, Mom. I just turned up the volume so the whole town could hear the truth. My name is Mara Ellis, and I've learned that distance doesn't heal all wounds, it just gives them room to fester in silence. At 31, I live alone in Graybridge, a foggy coastal town in Oregon where the pier creaks like old bones and the salt air stings your lungs if you run too fast. Every morning at 6:15, I jog past the fishing boats, their diesel engines coughing awake, and I think about how sound carries over water, how a scream could travel for miles if the wind was right. I work remotely for North Harbor Regional Health, analyzing revenue streams from my kitchen table that overlooks the gray Atlantic. Numbers don't lie. They don't make excuses or look the other way when columns don't balance. That's why I chose them over people. After what happened in Riverton 3 years ago, Riverton, even the name tastes bitter now. It's an inland city 4 hours east, where my mother Lydia still lives with Graham Whitfield in their perfect colonial with the wraparound porch and the kitchen that smells like lemon cleaner and buried rage. That kitchen god! I can still feel the cold granite counter against my hip when Graham cornered me during what should have been a simple argument about Thanksgiving plans. The slap came fast, his wedding ring catching my cheekbone. The silence that followed was worse. Lydia stood in the doorway, dish towel in her hands, and chose to see nothing. "Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be," she said, wringing that towel like she could squeeze the violence out of the air. I left that night with a duffel bag and a promise to myself never again would I let silence be mistaken for peace. 3 years passed. 3 years of declined invitations, missed holidays, and voicemails I deleted without listening. Then, last Tuesday, my phone rang during my lunch break. Lydia's voice poured out like honey laced with needles. "Sloane's getting engaged," she said, as if we talked every day. "The party's next Saturday. The Weatherbys will be there, and the Dunmores. You know how people talk when family doesn't show up." So, my sister Sloane, the golden child who graduated summa cum laude and never raised her voice, who looked through me that night like I was a ghost disrupting her perfect family portrait. Of course she was getting engaged. Of course there would be a party. "I'll come," I heard myself say. "On one condition, I handle the kitchen prep and the audio setup for the speeches." Audio setup. Lydia's confusion was genuine. She'd never been good with technology. "For the toasts. Professional quality. You want this to be perfect for Sloane, don't you?" "Of course, darling. Whatever you need." Darling. The word slithered through the phone like it had nowhere else to go. I hung up and opened my laptop, searching for Oregon's recording consent laws. Single-party consent state. Beautiful. That evening, I stood at my window watching the lighthouse beam sweep across the dark water, methodical as a metronome. In my head, I wasn't planning a return home. I was planning a reckoning. This time, I wouldn't leave with bruises and silence. This time, I'd leave with proof. The Uber receipt from Graybridge to Riverton would show I arrived 48 hours before the party. Plenty of time to prepare the house. Plenty of time to ensure that every word spoken in that kitchen would be captured, time-stamped, and undeniable. They say you can't go home again. They're wrong. You can go home, you just have to bring witnesses. The research took 3 days. Oregon law was clear recording in a private home required consent from at least one party present. Lydia's email authorizing me to install security and audio equipment for the party sat in my inbox like a loaded weapon. She'd assumed I meant a Ring doorbell and maybe a wireless mic for toasts. She assumed wrong. I arrived at the Riverton house on Thursday at 2:30 p.m., my rental car trunk carefully packed with equipment I'd practiced installing in my own kitchen a dozen times. The house looked exactly the same: white siding, black shutters, That porch swing that creaked on the third link of its chain. Lydia greeted me with air kisses that never quite landed. "You look thin," she said, which meant I looked unhappy. "Graham's at work. Let me help with your bags." "I've got it," I said, hefting the audio case. "Need to check the acoustics anyway." She fluttered off to her book club, leaving me alone in the house. Perfect. The new doorbell went up first, a smart model with dual-facing cameras and audio recording, cloud storage included. I synced it to a burner account, not the family's. The installation instructions would show Lydia had approved it. The footage would show everything else. In the kitchen, I worked methodically. The first lavalier mic went under the lip of the cabinet above the coffee maker Graham's spot every morning, where he liked to hold court. The second nestled against the refrigerator's trim, angled toward the island where arguments always seemed to bloom. Both were smaller than a penny, their wires painted to match the wood grain. The backup recorder went into the utility closet behind the mops, voice-activated, 8 hours of storage. I'd learned this from a podcast about documentary filmmaking, how to capture authentic moments. They'd talked about consent forms and ethics. I'd taken notes on battery life and frequency response. I calibrated everything to the kitchen's natural noise floor, the dishwasher's hum at 42 decibels, the refrigerator's cycle at 38. The mics would catch anything above a whisper, timestamp it, save it to 3 separate clouds. I photographed each placement. GPS coordinates embedded in the metadata. Chain of custody. Ray Donovan had said in her TED Talk about domestic violence documentation. Always establish chain of custody. The memories came uninvited as I worked. Graham teaching me to drive stick shift when I was 16. Patient then, calling me kiddo. The shift to something darker after he married Mom, little tests of control. Comments about my weight, my career, my attitude. How Lydia's spine got softer with each year, bending toward whatever kept the peace. At 4:45, I heard Graham's truck in the driveway. My hands stayed steady as I closed the utility closet, slipped my phone into my pocket. The kitchen looked untouched. Well, Graham said from the doorway. 6'2" of calculated casual golf shirt tucked into pressed khakis. The prodigal returns. "Just helping with party prep," I said, meeting his eyes. He moved into the kitchen, deliberately taking up space. "Your mother says you're doing something with computers now. Healthcare analytics. Fancy." He opened the refrigerator, shoulder brushing mine, though there was plenty of room. "You always did like keeping track of things." Writing every little grievance in that diary. My phone was recording in my pocket. Legal in Oregon. I've upgraded to spreadsheets. He laughed. The sound like gravel in a disposal. Sloane's fiancé is a real estate developer. Successful. Normal. You might learn something from watching them together. The old Mara would have taken the bait, gotten angry, given him what he wanted. This Mara smiled and made notes about which mic would have caught his voice best from that angle. "I'm sure the party will be very educational," I said, and left him standing there, confused by my calm. That night, I tested the system from my childhood bedroom, phone connected to the cloud accounts. Every word in the kitchen came through clear as water. Graham complaining about his dinner, Lydia apologizing, the clink of his bourbon glass on granite, the sigh that meant he was building toward something cruel. 46 hours until the party. Every word between now and then was evidence. Friday night's rehearsal dinner was held in the dining room. Just family. Sloane arrived at 6 sharp with her fiancé Derek, a bland man who sold beachfront condos and laughed too loud at Graham's jokes. The table was set with Lydia's wedding china, the one with tiny roses that looked like drops of blood against the white porcelain. "So nice to have everyone together," Lydia chirped, passing the salad. Her hands shook slightly. She'd been drinking wine since 4. I could tell by the careful way she pronounced her consonants. Sloane hadn't spoken to me directly yet, just smiled that pageant smile she'd perfected in high school. Derek filled the silence with market projections and interest rates. Graham carved the roast like he was performing surgery, each slice precise and violent. "Mara," Graham said suddenly, knife pausing midair. Tell us about your life in Graybridge. Any special someone? I'm focused on my career, I said, cutting my meat into smaller pieces than necessary. Career. He drew out the word like it was foreign. That's what they call it now when women can't keep a man. Graham, Lydia whispered. What I'm asking about her life. That's what families do. He pointed the knife at me. Casual, but not. Unless some families have secrets. Things they don't share. I set down my fork. Speaking of sharing, remember that Thanksgiving 3 years ago when we were discussing holiday plans? The room crystallized. Sloane's smile flickered. Lydia's wineglass stopped halfway to her lips. What about it? Graham's voice dropped a register. Just wondering if anyone else remembers how that discussion ended. How it ended, Graham repeated slowly. Was you throwing a tantrum and abandoning your family? Is that how you remember it? I looked at Lydia. Mom, what do you remember? She took a long sip of wine. I remember we all said things we didn't mean. Did we all do things we didn't mean too? Graham's fork scraped against his plate. Careful, Mara. You're a guest here. Actually, I'm family. Isn't that what you just said? My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I glanced at the screen. Stop making trouble or you'll regret it. I screenshotted immediately. Added it to the folder labeled Evidence. When I looked up, Graham was watching me, but Derek was texting under the table. Interesting. Who was that? Sloane asked, her first words to me all evening. Just work, I said. You know how it is with careers. After dinner, I helped clear plates while the others moved to the living room. Mrs. Klein from next door had stopped by with a casserole for tomorrow, her hearing aid whistling as she hugged Lydia. These old houses, she said to me in the kitchen, patting my arm. Thin walls. I worry sometimes, hearing raised voices. Last night especially. Last night, I kept my voice neutral. Around 11. Sounded like Graham was quite upset about something. These men and their tempers. She shook her head. In my day, we knew how to handle them better. I wanted to ask what she meant by handle, but Graham appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Klein, didn't hear you come in. Just dropping off my famous green bean casserole. She smiled but stepped back slightly. I'll let myself out. When she was gone, Graham moved closer. You always did like to stir up drama. I've been perfectly pleasant. Pleasant. He laughed. You come back here after 3 years, asking questions, making implications. What's your game? No game. Just wanted to support Sloane. Bullshit. His breath smelled like bourbon and rage. You want to embarrass us, make some scene at the party tomorrow. Why would I do that? Because you're vindictive. Always have been, writing things down, keeping score. I smiled. Maybe I just have a good memory. His hand twitched, and for a second I thought he might do it right there, with family 20 feet away. But Lydia called out, asking about coffee, and the moment passed. That night, I uploaded everything to a backup drive and emailed copies to myself. The kitchen mics had caught Graham's late-night rant to Lydia about my attitude, my threats, how I needed to be put in my place. She's dangerous, he'd said at 11:14 p.m. She's planning something. He was right about that part. Tomorrow was the party. Tomorrow. Everything would be on record. Saturday arrived wrapped in perfect weather, the kind of crisp October afternoon that made Riverton look like a movie set. By 4 p.m., the house hummed with caterers and florists. I stationed myself in the kitchen, arranging canapes on silver platters while guests began arriving. The mics were recording everything: the pop of champagne corks, Lydia's nervous laughter, the doorbell's chime as it captured each arrival. The party swelled through the rooms. Sloane held court in the living room, her engagement ring catching light like a tiny disco ball. Derek's parents had driven up from California, his mother wearing pearls the size of grapes. Graham worked the crowd, playing the proud stepfather, his voice booming across conversations about property values and golf handicaps. At 7:20 p.m., I was alone in the kitchen, refilling the bruschetta tray. The party noise filtered through the closed-door distant music, muffled conversations. I heard Graham before I saw him, his footsteps deliberate on the hardwood. He shut the door behind him, locked it. "We need to talk," he said. I kept my back to him, arranging tomatoes on bread. "The guests need food. The guests can wait." He moved closer. I could smell his cologne, same brand he'd worn for years, like rotting wood masked with spice. "You think you're clever, don't you? Coming here, playing the dutiful daughter." "I'm just here for Sloane." "Stop!" His hand slammed on the counter beside me. The lavalier mic was 3 inches from his palm. "You're here to cause trouble, to dredge up your lies." I turned to face him, back pressed against the granite. "What lies would those be?" "You know what you told people, after you left." "I didn't tell anyone anything." "Maybe that was the problem." His face reddened. "You ungrateful little bitch. We gave you everything, a home, a family, stability after your worthless father died. Is that what you call it, stability?" He grabbed my wrist, hard, the kind of grip that leaves marks. "Listen carefully. You're going to get through tonight without any drama. You're going to smile, give a nice toast about Sloane, and then disappear again. Understood? Let go of me. Do you understand? Graham, you're hurting me. No one's going to believe you." His fingers tightened. "Just like before, your word against mine." "And who are you? A bitter spinster who abandoned her family." I tried to pull away. He yanked me forward, then pushed me back against the counter. My hip hit the edge hard. A glass fell, shattered on the tile. "Stop!" The word came out louder than I intended. His hand came up fast, caught my cheek with the same precise violence as 3 years ago. The ring. Always the ring. This time I felt it split skin. "Nobody's going to believe you," he whispered, leaning close. "Not Lydia, not Sloane, not anyone out there who matters." The kitchen door rattled. "Dad," Sloane's voice. "Is everything okay?" Graham stepped back, smoothing his shirt. "Fine, Princess. Mara just dropped something." The door opened. Sloane stood there in her cocktail dress, taking in the scene me against the counter, hand to my face, broken glass on the floor, Graham's chest rising and falling too fast. "What happened?" she asked, but her eyes were already deciding. "Your sister's had too much wine," Graham said. "Got emotional about the engagement. You know how she is." I pulled my hand away from my face, blood on my palm. Sloane saw it. I know she did. "Mara," she said slowly, Are you doing this again?" "Doing what again?" "Making scenes, creating drama." Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. "This is my engagement party. I'm not the one who— Just stop." She looked at Graham, then back at me. "Can you just stop for once?" Lydia appeared behind her, taking in the tableau, the broken glass, my face, Graham's defensive stance. "What on earth?" she began. "Mara's upset," Graham said. "Maybe she should lie down." "I'm not upset," I said clearly. For the microphones, Graham followed me into the kitchen, locked the door, grabbed my wrist, and hit me, just like he did 3 years ago. The words hung in the air like suspended glass shards. "How dare you?" Lydia whispered, but she was looking at me, not him. The doorbell camera would have caught anyone entering or leaving. The kitchen mics had recorded every word, every sound, even the specific pitch of glass breaking at 7:32 p.m. The backup recorder in the closet was still running. "I'm calling the police," I said, pulling out my phone. "On my daughter's engagement party." Lydia's voice cracked. "You would ruin this for her." I looked at Sloane, who was staring at the floor, at Lydia, who was already choosing her side, at Graham, whose smile was starting to form because he thought he'd won again. "No," I said. "You ruined it. I'm just making sure everyone hears it." I dialed 911 right there in the kitchen, speaker on so everyone could hear. "I need to report an assault." 472 Maple Drive, Riverton. Yes, I'm safe now. There are witnesses present. Graham lunged for my phone but stopped when Sloane gasped. Too many eyes. The music from the party seemed absurdly cheerful through the walls. Police Chief Miguel Hart arrived in 12 minutes with 2 officers. I knew him by reputation, former Portland detective who'd moved to Riverton for a quieter life. He took in the scene with practiced eyes, the broken glass, my swelling cheek, Graham's defensive posture, the family dynamics crackling like live wires. "Ma'am, can you tell me what happened?" Hart asked me. "I have it recorded," I said, pulling out the memory card I'd removed from my phone just minutes before. "Audio and video evidence. There are recording devices in this kitchen, installed with the homeowner's written consent." I handed him my phone, showing Lydia's email, then the second phone with the backup files, then printed screenshots of the mic placements with timestamps. "The doorbell camera will show who entered and exited. The kitchen recordings will have everything that was said and done." Graham's face went white. "You can't record someone without— Oregon is a single-party consent state," Hart interrupted. "If Ms. Ellis was part of the conversation, she could legally record it." "This is entrapment," Graham sputtered. "No, sir. Entrapment is when law enforcement induces someone to commit a crime. This is just documentation." I led Hart to the utility closet, showed him the backup recorder still blinking red. We went outside where I pointed out the doorbell camera. Each piece of evidence was photographed, tagged, and sealed in evidence bags. Chain of custody maintained. "We'll need to document your injuries," Hart said. I nodded. The ER was quiet for a Saturday night. The nurse who photographed my face and wrist was thorough, multiple angles, ruler for scale, detailed notes about the ring-shaped cut on my cheekbone. The doctor, a young woman named Patel, was gentle but precise in her examination. "This bruising pattern," she said quietly. "It's consistent with being struck by someone wearing a ring. The laceration is about 3 millimeters deep. You'll want to follow up with your primary care physician." Every form was filled out. Every box checked. Paper trails mattered. By 10 p.m., I was back at the police station with Ray Donovan, the lawyer I'd contacted weeks ago. She'd driven down from Portland in record time, her silver hair pinned back, her suit immaculate despite the hour. "We'll file for an emergency restraining order tonight," she said, reviewing the evidence. "With this documentation, it should be granted immediately." We listened to the audio together in Hart's office. Graham's voice filled the small space. "Nobody's going to believe you." The sound of the slap was crisp, undeniable. Even the glass breaking had been captured in perfect detail. "Jesus," Hart muttered. "In my experience, when someone says nobody will believe you, they've usually done this before." 3 years ago," I said. "No evidence then, just bruises and my mother's silence." Ray placed her hand on mine. "Not this time." Graham was brought in at 11:45 p.m., escorted from his home in handcuffs while neighbors watched from their windows. Mrs. Klein was on her porch, no longer looking away. The weekend desk sergeant processed him slowly, methodically, like he had all the time in the world. Lydia called my phone 17 times. I didn't answer. Sloane texted once. "How could you—" "The emergency hearing was set for 9 a.m. Sunday." Ray prepared the filing with surgical precision, the audio files, the photographs, the medical documentation, my written statement about the assault 3 years prior, the pattern of escalation. "We're also filing a civil suit," she said. "Assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Your medical bills, therapy costs, lost wages from trauma, it all counts. He'll say I provoked him. Let him. We have his words. Nobody's going to believe you." That's consciousness of guilt. He knew what he was doing was wrong. I spent that night in a hotel, door locked and chained, listening to the recordings one more time. Not the violence, I'd heard enough of that, but the silence after. Lydia's breathing, Sloane's shifting feet, the party continuing in the next room, oblivious. At 3 a.m., a text from an unknown number. "You've destroyed our family." I added it to the evidence folder. Then I turned off my phone and finally let myself cry, not from pain or fear, but from relief. 3 years of carrying this alone, and now the whole world would hear it. The truth was out, timestamp by timestamp, decibel by decibel, and nobody could claim they didn't believe me anymore. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, all wood paneling and fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. Sunday morning emergency hearings drew a sparse but interested crowd, 2 reporters from the Riverton Gazette, a blogger who covered domestic violence cases, 3 members of Graham's church board who'd heard about their property committee chair's arrest. Judge Patricia Reeves presided, a former prosecutor with a reputation for suffering no fools. Graham sat with his attorney, an overpriced suit from Portland who kept checking his watch like he had somewhere better to be. Lydia and Sloane were behind him, their faces carefully neutral. "Ms. Donovan," Judge Reeves began, "you're requesting an emergency protective order. Present your evidence." Ray stood. "Your Honor, we have audio recordings of last night's assault, captured with the homeowner's written consent for security equipment installation. May we play a portion? Proceed." The courtroom speakers came alive with the kitchen scene. Every word crystal clear. Graham's threats, my plea to stop, the slap that cracked like a gunshot in the small space. Several people in the gallery flinched. "Nobody's going to believe you," Graham's recorded voice said, and I watched his attorney's shoulders drop. "We also have medical documentation," Ray continued, presenting the ER reports. Photos showing defensive bruising on my client's wrist and a laceration on her face consistent with being struck by a ring. The pattern matches the defendant's wedding band. She introduced the doorbell footage next to Graham entering the kitchen at 7:20 p.m. The door closing, me not emerging until 7:33, blood visible on my face. "Your Honor, this is not an isolated incident. 3 years ago, Ms. Ellis left the family home after a similar assault. No charges were filed then due to lack of evidence, but the pattern is clear." Graham's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client maintains this was a mutual altercation that's been taken out of context." "Mutual?" Judge Reeves interrupted. I heard the recording, "Counselor." "What exactly was mutual about it?" The provocation, Your Honor. Ms. Ellis deliberately installed recording equipment to document. There's a difference. Does your client deny striking Ms. Ellis? A pause. He admits there was physical contact, but while preventing her from leaving a locked room, the judge's voice could have frozen water. After grabbing her wrist hard enough to leave these marks, she held up the medical photos. Behind Graham, I saw Sloane pressing her hands together so hard her knuckles went white. Lydia stared at the floor. "The emergency order is granted," Judge Reeves said. "Mr. Whitfield is to stay 500 feet away from Ms. Ellis. No contact, direct or indirect. This includes through family members." She looked pointedly at Lydia. "Violation will result in immediate arrest." But we weren't done. Ray had submitted the evidence to the district attorney's office, and ADA Jennifer Martinez was present. "Your Honor," Martinez said, "based on this evidence, the state is filing formal charges. Assault in the 4th degree, menacing, harassment. Mr. Whitfield, you'll need to surrender for booking by 5 p.m. today." The church board members were whispering furiously. One was already on his phone, probably calling an emergency meeting. Graham's reputation, so carefully built over 15 years, was crumbling in real time. "There's more," Ray said. "We've received information that Mr. Whitfield's employer, Whitfield Construction, which has several contracts with the city, has a morality clause requiring disclosure of any arrests involving violence." Graham's attorney objected. But the damage was done. The reporters were scribbling notes. The blogger was already typing. Outside the courthouse, a small group had gathered. Mrs. Klein was there with 2 other neighbors. "We should have spoken up," she said to me, clutching my hand. "We heard things. We knew." Channel 6 had sent a camera crew. The reporter, a young woman named Sarah, asked for a statement. I just want people to understand, I said, looking directly at the camera, that domestic violence thrives in silence. When we don't believe victims, when we choose reputation over truth, we enable abusers. I had to record my own assault to be believed. No one should have to go to those lengths. Behind me, Graham emerged with his attorney, head down, rushing toward his car. Someone shouted, "Shame." Another voice, "We believe Mara." The Riverton Gazette's website already had the story up. Local business owner charged with assault after recorded evidence surfaces. The comments section was exploding. Screenshots of the article were being shared on Facebook, on the church's community page, on Whitfield Construction's Google reviews. Lydia tried to approach me as I walked to Ray's car. "Mara, please." Ray stepped between us. The restraining order includes indirect contact through family members. "Mrs. Whitfield, please step back." "You're destroying him," Lydia said, tears streaming. "His reputation, his business." "He destroyed those himself," I said. I just turned on a microphone. Monday morning, Ray arranged a press conference on the courthouse steps. Word had spread over social media. Sunday night, Believe Mara was trending locally, and 3 domestic violence advocacy groups had reached out offering support. Channel 6 was back, along with crews from Portland stations and a stringer for the AP. "We're going to play 30 seconds of the audio," Ray told me. "Edited to remove identifying information about others, but Graham's voice will be clear. Are you ready?" I nodded. The crowd had grown to about 50 people, advocates, neighbors, strangers who'd followed the story online. Graham would be arriving soon for his formal booking. Ray had timed this perfectly. She approached the cluster of microphones. "Thank you for coming. My client, Mara Ellis, was assaulted in her family home Saturday night during what should have been a celebration. For too long, domestic violence has hidden behind closed doors and family silence. Today, we're opening those doors." The audio played through a portable speaker, even compressed and edited. Graham's voice carried across the plaza. "Nobody's going to believe you." Then the slap. A woman in the crowd gasped. Others shook their heads. "This recording," Ray continued, "was made legally in a single-party consent state. Ms. Ellis had every right to document what happened to her. We should ask ourselves why victims need to go to such lengths to be believed." Questions erupted. Sarah from Channel 6 asked about the 3-year-old assault. A Portland reporter wanted to know about Graham's business connections. Then someone shouted, "There he is!" Graham's Mercedes pulled up to the police station entrance. He emerged with his attorney, saw the cameras, and his face went purple. Instead of walking past quietly, he stopped. "This is a setup," he shouted at the cameras. "That woman is disturbed. She's always been jealous of her sister, always causing problems." His attorney grabbed his arm, trying to pull him inside, but Graham was beyond control now. The image everyone would see on the evening news, a red-faced man in an expensive suit, screaming at cameras while being dragged into a police station. "Ask her why she really left 3 years ago," he yelled. "Ask her what she did to deserve—" He stopped, realizing what he'd almost said, but the cameras had caught it all. Inside the station, Chief Hart processed Graham's booking personally. Fingerprints. Mugshot. The photo would be public record within hours. Graham Whitfield, successful businessman, church board member, with a booking number across his chest. Meanwhile, the Riverton First Methodist Board had called an emergency meeting. By 2 p.m., they'd voted unanimously to remove Graham from all positions. The statement was brief. "We take allegations of violence seriously and cannot have anyone in leadership who fails to meet our moral standards." Whitfield Construction's biggest client, the Riverton School District, announced they were reviewing their contracts in light of recent events. By 3 p.m., 2 more clients had pulled out. Graham's business partner filed papers to dissolve their partnership before close of business. The social media storm was fierce but focused. Screenshots of old photos from church events circulated with new context. Graham's hand on Lydia's shoulder looked controlling now, not protective. His smile seemed predatory, not paternal. Sloane finally called at 4:15 p. "Don't celebrate too much," she said, voice hollow. "You've gotten what you wanted. He's destroyed." "I wanted to be believed," I said, 3 years ago. All I wanted was for someone to believe me. She paused. "The engagement's off. Derek said his family can't be associated with this scandal. Are you happy now? Are you asking if I'm happy that Derek showed you who he really is before you married him?" "Yes, actually." She hung up. At 5 p.m., Graham was formally charged and released on bail with conditions: no alcohol, no weapons, no contact with me, mandatory anger management classes. The judge also ordered him to surrender his passport. "Your client seems to have anger issues," Judge Reeves noted dryly after reviewing the footage of his courthouse outburst. That evening, the video compilation went viral. The courthouse audio, Graham's meltdown, Chief Hart leading him into booking. Someone had set it to music. "Nobody's gonna believe you" became a bitter rallying cry. The video had 50,000 views in the first hour. Mrs. Klein organized a candlelight vigil in front of the house. 20 neighbors showed up, then 30, then 50. They stood in silent support, flames flickering in the darkness. Someone had made signs: "We believe survivors." "Silence enables violence." Mara was right. Lydia watched from the window, backlit and alone. She'd tried to call me 43 times, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails that Ray intercepted and documented for potential restraining order violations. "You're killing our family." The last message said, "Graham's lost everything. Is that what you wanted?" Standing at my hotel window, watching the vigil live stream on my phone, I spoke to her unhearing ears. "The family was already dead. Mom, I just performed the autopsy." The courthouse steps where we'd played the audio were empty now, but the echo remained online, in living rooms, in the space between what families show and what they hide. Tomorrow would bring the formal arraignment. Tonight, for the first time in 3 years, I slept without fear. Tuesday's arraignment was swift. Graham pleaded not guilty, but his lawyer's heart wasn't in it. The evidence was overwhelming, the public sentiment clear. The judge upheld all restrictions and set a trial date for January. Graham left through the back entrance, his Mercedes no longer shiny, his shoulders no longer straight. By Wednesday, the dominoes were falling fast. The court approved a long-term restraining order, 2 years, renewable. Graham's church officially banned him from the property. His business partner bought him out for pennies on the dollar. The man who'd controlled every room he entered now couldn't enter any room that mattered. The civil suit Ray filed was settled within a week. Graham's insurance company, seeing the evidence, pushed hard for settlement rather than a trial that would generate more damaging publicity. The number was substantial enough to cover my therapy, my legal fees, and the 3 years of life I'd lost to silence. But the real cost came in the mail. Thursday morning, a foreclosure notice on the house, with Graham's business destroyed and legal fees mounting. They'd missed 2 mortgage payments. The house Graham had lorded over. The kitchen where he'd cornered me twice, it would belong to the bank within 90 days. Lydia called Ray's office, begging to speak to me. "Just once," she pleaded. "Just let me explain." I agreed to a video call with Ray present, recording everything. Lydia looked 10 years older, her perfect makeup cracked, her carefully styled hair limp. "The house," she said. "We're losing the house." "I know. Is that what you wanted to see us homeless?" I wanted to be heard, to be believed. "The house was never a home anyway. It was a stage for Graham's performance." "He's not a monster," she whispered. He has problems." "Yes," I said. "And those problems have names: assault, battery, coercive control. You chose his problems over your daughter's safety. I chose my marriage. You chose silence. And silence chose him." She started crying then, ugly sobs that shook her shoulders. For a moment, I almost felt something. Then I remembered her standing in that doorway 3 years ago, wringing that dish towel, choosing to see nothing. Friday afternoon. Sloane sent a single text. "I heard everything that night. The mics picked up my conversation with Derek in the hallway. I knew he hit you, and I still blamed you. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late to matter. Saturday. I drove back to Graybridge, my testimony recorded, my depositions complete. The salt air hit me as I crossed the bridge, and for the first time in years, I could breathe fully. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it, quiet, simple, mine. I pulled the final lavalier mic from my jacket pocket, the one I'd been carrying since the night of the party, just in case. Such a small thing to have captured so much truth. I locked it in my filing cabinet, in a folder labeled Evidence Final. The trial would come in January. Graham would likely take a plea deal to avoid the spectacle of public testimony. He'd serve a few months at most, probably in minimum security. But his real prison was already built. Every Google search of his name would show his mugshot. Every job application would require explaining his conviction. Every new relationship would eventually find the videos. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, then recognized the area code, Riverton. Ms. Ellis, this is Chief Hart. Thought you should know we've had 2 more women come forward. Former employees of Graham's. Similar stories. No evidence then, but they're willing to testify about the pattern. I thanked him and hung up. Outside my window, the lighthouse swept its beam across dark water, steady as always. Warning ships away from the rocks that everyone knew were there but pretended not to see. That night, I opened my laptop and began writing. Not a revenge story. Revenge suggests the desire to hurt someone in return. This was something else, a reclamation. I'd taken back my voice, my story, my right to be believed. The microphones had been tools, but the power was in finally speaking the truth and insisting it be heard. The last line I wrote, Graham was right about one thing nobody would have believed me, so I made sure everybody had to hear it. I closed the laptop and walked to my window. Somewhere in Riverton, Graham was alone in an empty house with his rage. Lydia was packing boxes, finally forced to see what she'd spent years ignoring. Sloane was rebuilding her life without the weight of pretense, and I was here, in my small apartment by the sea, with nothing but the truth and the sound of waves that never stop telling their story. No matter who listens, the end. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Your experiences and perspectives matter, and this community grows stronger when we share our truths together.